Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to our February 20th presentation on comprehensive immigration reform. Just a few notes before we start. We ask that everyone keep their microphones muted during the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat, and Catherine Anderson from St. Mark's will be collecting those for the second half of the presentation when we'll have a Q&A section. On March 7th, for our next meeting, we will be hosting Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, who is well known from her book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, and we're very happy to have her speaking about her upcoming book, which is titled Not a Nation of Immigrants, Settler Colonialism, White Supremacy, and a History of Erasure and Exclusion. That'll be at 1 o'clock on March 7th. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome or introduce Reverend Vanessa Southern from the First Unitarian Universalist Society in San Francisco.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to have you here. And as I mentioned in service, today is the birthday of John Lewis. So in the spirit of people who give themselves over to the work for a lifetime, we gather to take up this piece of the work, hand it over to us, one piece of it. Thought we'd open this morning with a brief time of centering and prayer. Grounding and abiding love that we know intimately in our connections to one another that bind us in joy and struggle. Abiding love that we know as justice when it shows up in public. That we know present in our acts of witness and solidarity done to uphold human dignity howsoever we can. We give thanks for this time together, for these committed and insightful speakers offering their lives and life's work to help guide us in our own, as a community of faith called as we are to work to bend the moral arc of the universe down to touch earth. May our minds be enlightened this hour and our hearts be emboldened and our feet be directed in the right direction for the living that we will do and the working that we will do when we leave the gift of this time together today. With gratitude and open hearts, we gather. Amen. So in a spirit of receptivity and curiosity and recommitment, we gather today to this forum entitled How to Achieve a Complete Inclusive Immigration Reform, the Moral and Economic Foundation. It's great to have you all here and our panelists. As many of you know, it has been more than 3 decades since a viable pathway to legalization has existed for the millions of immigrant workers and their families. We all know how vital this population is to our community, to the very functioning of our society. And yet we also know, especially in the last few years, how much our immigrant brothers and sisters have had to live with the constant threat of arrest and incarceration and deportation. So it feels time, and it has been time for a while, to look at an immigration strategy for legalization, people's right to become citizens, for the right to asylum for our refugees, for the right, certainly, to live without fear. And we are in what we hope is a special moment right now. We have waited for a special moment. Just this week, the Biden administration put forward a broad immigration reform proposal. It clearly won't be easy to achieve, but as people of faith, we have a moral responsibility to aid this effort. And so we are here today to hear about how we might do so, what levers for change might exist for us to lean into together and with other groups that we share this set of commitments with. So we are incredibly fortunate, as those of you know who looked at our set of panelists today, maybe read their bios, 4 people who have the ability to provide us with guidance on the moral, economic, and practical aspects of this task that lies ahead of us right now. Among our panelists today, I want to welcome, with such gratitude, Reverend Nelson Rabell Gonzalez, Associate Pastor of St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Lodi, who's going to speak with us first today about the moral and theological foundations for this work. So what grounds us in spirit as we enter this work. Then Dr. Raul Hinajosa from the Cesar Y. Chavez Department of Chicana and Chicano Studies at the University of California in Los Angeles is here, and he will present us with some of the economic benefits of immigration reform, arm us with that information instead of arguments. Next, we will be graced by Lydia Camarillo from the Southwest Registration and Education Project, who's coming to us, I believe, today from Texas via phone, who will discuss civic engagement and political participation, so as we choose our way forward. And Magali Sanchez-Hall is our last speaker, research scholar at the University of Los Angeles North American Development and Integration Center, who will speak to us about the grassroots mobilization, the calls to action, the strategizing that we need to be about. Thank you all for being here. We are incredibly lucky to have you all here. Thank you for making the time. And with that brief introduction, I want to ask Reverend Rabell Gonzalez, who I should mention, most recently has been leading the effort to get COVID-19 vaccines available to farm workers and other workers who, though they have been called essential, have not actually been treated as essential in the vital distribution of the vaccines. And so we commend him in that work also. And so let's begin. Reverend Rabell Gonzalez, I think we'll have about 10 minutes for your introduction to our work, and then Raul, you'll have about a half an hour to talk to us about some of the data and other arguments that you brought, and Lydia and Magali, you'll each have 10 minutes. And if you like, I can give you a little timing warning, but I'm happy to listen to as much as you're willing to share with us today. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Reverend Southern. It's an honor to be here among all of you, our siblings in faith, and also our siblings in the search for justice for migrants, refugees, and other vulnerable communities looking for a safe haven among us. I would like to start with a few words from, I'm a Lutheran pastor who serves in the ELCA. I serve in Lodi, California, which is a city south of Sacramento in California Central Valley. And our denomination, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, made a statement, social statement regarding immigration. I just want to read some of the first sentences from this statement. It says, "We recognize and rejoice that our church, along with our country, continues to change with the steady arrival of newcomers in the United States. Persons who have recently come from Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, and other areas of the world are enriching congregations throughout the ELCA. We celebrate the liturgy in 33 languages. We worship and sing in Spanish with our new hymnal. Newcomers are increasingly assuming leadership roles in our congregations, synods, affiliated educational and social ministry agencies, and church-wide ministries. We are beginning new congregations in immigrant communities. We thank God for these developments. And we remember Paul's admonition, welcome one another, just as Christ has welcomed you to the glory of God. Romans chapter 15, verse 7. If we start with what hospitality is, this idea of welcoming the stranger among us, we have to not only go back to the Hebrew scriptures, but we have to go back to the very foundation of creation itself. I like this image of God when God created the universe, this idea of making space for us to exist. Since God occupies every aspect, every space, every possible space is occupied by God. And then God has to compress in a way in order for us to exist. This is exactly what hospitality is. It's in a sense, it's sacrificial. It entails work, entails humility, love, compassion, empathy. And in some respects, like I mentioned in the beginning in reference to creation, it may require some of us to compress, all of us, to compress so that others may also experience life. So hospitality in itself, we look back in the ancient Hebrew scriptures, from Abraham, actually Adam and Eve being the first migrants and refugees, being expelled from the Garden of Eden according to the story. So this theme of immigration, the theme of moving because there's danger or there is a sense of life being threatened, or in search of an oasis of life, or a new home, a new land, is prevalent throughout the Bible. And every major tradition, religious tradition, our Muslim siblings, our Jewish siblings, other traditions as well, have this sense of hospitality. We have to understand in the Middle East, where the Bible is written, and then in the Mediterranean world, this concept of hospitality, what later was developed to be the concept of sanctuary, asking for sanctuary, has its roots in the very fact that human beings have always been moving from place to place in search for a better place because of weather, because of lack of food, or social or instability, or looking for a place to establish themselves and create community. And throughout the development of humanity, and if we look at as people of faith, we look at sacred texts. The Hebrew scriptures are very clear that just to mention one text in particular, I want to highlight, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 33. It says this: when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Why is this text so important? Because if we look at the experience of the Israelites, their self-understanding is grounded in the Exodus event. And they are reminded in their own scripture that the reason why they should treat, the moral reason why they should treat migrants, refugees, the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, in such a way that they feel they are part of the community, is because they themselves experienced that at some point in their life. So the moral foundation or theological foundation for this work that we're about to embark, and besides obviously the good numbers that Professor Hinajosa is gonna bring us, is the fact that in the history of God, if we look at the history of God, the history of faith, the history of this search for the good, the just, the righteous among us, what is really good for humanity. Empathy is at the core of that search. Not only is this written in the code, the Leviticus is basically the code for the priests, those who are in charge of the worship of God. That verse I just read, Leviticus 19, verse 33, is encoded in that book as a reminder for not just the priests, but for the whole nation, for the whole people, the kahal, the assembly, that their experience of oppression should not be repeated. that their experience of oppression should lead them to a moral way of life where oppression, marginalization, exclusion, and I'm going to be more particular and specific, politics of anti-immigrant politics, anti-refugee politics have no room in a moral community. And if we claim to be a moral community, not just as people of faith, but as we go into the world and listen to what Magali and Lydia are going to talk to us about, the practical, the know-how, the what to do in terms of the political realm, we need to bring this with us to use the moral argument, the economic argument, yes, to persuade our elected officials, but most importantly, we need to convey this idea of what the moral issue is, what's at stake. What's at stake is our own identity. What's at stake is who we are. People might argue, yes, of course, but what about, and I'll get there in just one second, what about the ones that need the welcoming? Absolutely, but hear me out first. This is about who we are, because if we are not able to look in the mirror, like this text and throughout the prophets and the New Testament and other sacred texts have proclaimed, the understanding of the divinity is as the great host who welcomes everyone at the table. Therefore, if you go to the New Testament, even Judas is welcome at the table of Jesus. Even Judas has Holy Communion, right? So the idea of the divine is always associated with this radical inclusivity, radical hospitality. So for us not to, as people of faith, as people who are gathered around a sense of the divine or a sense of the creator, the sustainer of this world, where this creator, sustainer, sanctifier, redeemer of this world has, it seems to be, as we study all scriptures, a deep, deep concern for hospitality and welcoming. Therefore then, as people of faith, this is about what we're proclaiming, about the one that is sending us from our different perspectives and understandings of who God is, who the divine is. We are being sent by the one that we're proclaiming to be hospitable, because the very nature of the divine is to be hospitable towards us. And as we encounter in our journey, peoples, communities, vulnerable communities, starting with, obviously, there's racism, there's homophobia, there's xenophobia. So if we, as moral people, people gather in the name of the divine, are not able to hold the mirror towards the world and remind them, just like the writers of Leviticus and the Pentateuch did to the community, and hold up the mirror and say, we shall not oppress or marginalize refugees and migrants, because the great host has welcomed us, because the great creator has welcomed us. And whether you're Muslim, Jew, Christian, Buddhist, no faith, no understanding or belief in the divine, we all know that we are called somehow. We understand, we know that we need each other, that we have to welcome each other. So even without the faith component of proclaiming or pointing to the great beyond, if you will, or the creator, we have need for each other. And that's why every moral community, every community of faith has seen in their own experience somehow the need to reflect those values. And even, and I'll finish with this, the Shema, which is the Jewish creed, Shema Yisrael, where the Jewish people claim their identity as followers of Yahweh. In that creed, they are reminded that they were migrants. For a wandering Aramean was my ancestor. So there's a connection. It's like the creed, the faith, is leading us back to empathy, to those, to communities, to peoples who are in this moment suffering, being excluded, and in need of a safe haven. May we work hard. May we compress. May we welcome all of God's children. Let it be so. Amen.
Thank you so much. Dr. Raul Hinajosa.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, everybody, for being here. You know, I just got to say just a quick thing. You know, I am myself an immigrant. I was born in Mexico, raised in the South Side of Chicago. Having done a lot of political work in Chicago, where I got my PhD, I moved to California. We actually, I was just speaking about this, got my start with the Black Panthers, and you know, and therefore led to something I did with Harold Washington, the first Black mayor of the city of Chicago. And we came to California. I came to California with a vision that the next level of transformation was going to be out of California and out of U.S. Mexico. So I've been working on these issues for a while, and what I want to talk about today is that I do think we're at a really fascinating moment in terms of the political economy of North America, U.S., Mexico, Central America, and that both from an economic point of view and a political point of view, at a turning point. And I think it's incumbent upon us to understand, again, this historical realities that we're in and where we need to move to do a lot of great work. And I must say, I've also been very consciously reaching out with the help of Magali Sanchez-Hall, who works with me at UCLA, who was my former student. She'll tell you her story, undocumented, who then, with raising single children, eventually was able to regularize status, come to UCLA, got her BA and her MA with me, and now is working very closely with us. And we're building network. So our concept is the research in the university and connected to political work. And part of the political work we're doing, as she introduced me to the Reverend and to a number of networks, we have to move, I'm convinced, strategically mobilize the religious community. So what, because I do think that what we're up to, we are gonna have an economic discussion, right? But we're also going to have, as I think the Reverend was saying, a very deep discussion about, as Biden calls it, the soul of America, right? And I'll end with some media work that we're doing that works, by the way, ironically, I know this might sound a little strange, but we're making strange alliances of all types. We're working with people out of the Lincoln Project, which these days has a very bad reputation, but up until recently was doing very interesting work. So, and what was very interesting when this presentation I'm about to give you, I gave to them, and they said, great, lovely, fantastic work, that research you've done on the economic impact, but if you're going to move Republicans, the Republicans that we can move, yes, you can move them with some discussions about economics, but what we think are the movable Republicans are the ones that don't want to be called racist. that have gotten to a point where in a sense, Donald Trump has framed the issue in such a way that what's really interesting is that we are seeing a move for the first time ever. More people now believe there should be more immigration than less immigration in the United States. All right, and it's a lot of these Republicans who are supposedly church-going and involved in these ecumenical discussions. So I want to come back to that in the end. How do we get to strategy? But all right, so but I want to start with just some basic numbers, which I think a lot of people don't get, and I think are very important for the discussion. So I think what I'm going to do, if I don't mess this up right now, is show you just a little bit of blind you with my science for a second here. Okay. So this is this research center at UCLA. And like I say, we've been doing lots of work, including I made a movie called A Day Without a Mexican. I don't know if anybody saw that, but I wrote that, and it was filmed, in fact, right in this very room, where I'm Professor Abdul Hassan in that movie, just because I'm a hippie and I wear these hats. So we decided to play off of that. I'm Abdul Hassan because Raul, my co-author, has disappeared, as has all the Mexicans in California in that movie, right? And so that I'm known for that. Although I've done a lot of these books stacked up here as well. And the point that we're making in those books and in this is that immigrants and immigration reform is really about economic future and destiny of the United States, and particularly at this moment of essential workers, we can see that more clearly than ever. In fact, we just did a study recently that we call Essential Workers, Disposable Families, where we did an analysis that came up with some very interesting numbers about how essential, in fact, essential immigrants are to the economy, and at this moment of COVID, and that we can't live without them. The fascinating thing is that if you look at the undocumented population of about 11 million, approximately 75% of them are actually defined by the Department of Homeland Security as essential and critical workers. Okay, so it's not just me making a movie. The Department of Homeland Security says we can't live without these people. All right. The question, though, is how much economic contribution do they bring? I think that this is astonishing to a lot of people. It turns out, if you look at all the undocumented population in the United States, they contribute on an annual basis every year $2.1 trillion in economic activity. $2.1 trillion. That is the biggest country, Latin American country in the world, is inside the United States. All right, and they contribute close to $500 billion in taxes. So this is not about be kind and hug a Mexican and charity. This is about the fact that these are a population that is fundamental to the economy of the United States, fundamental to this moment of crisis, and they have earned a status, and that status, they've also paid for it as taxpayers. And again, what I'm about to show you is that the actual impact of legalization is even bigger than this. We did a study 10 years ago. Well, this is actually our new study, which is showing that if we had a day without a Mexican today, the economy of the United States would collapse by about $3 trillion immediately. Okay, it would be the worst depression. The 1930s doesn't even come close. Forget what we're going through now. We simply would not survive. But legalization actually produces a total of about $2.1 trillion in just the legalizing the people that are here and letting them have wages which would be equal to the typical US citizen who has the same work job, the same education, etc., but they get undocumented workers get 25% less. So not only do they do the most hard work and they pay massive taxes, they get the least pay for that work in the United States. It turns out if we legalize them, if we legalize the undocumented, then we actually would allow them to become also even more contributors to the US economy, right? So again, this is going to be, we're releasing this study next week. I won't go into all the details in case people are, if they're interested, we could talk about it. But basically it comes down to that the impact of legalization and the new US Citizenship Act of 2021, which was just released on Thursday. We're releasing in a study this coming week, which basically puts the total amount of the economic benefit of that bill at about $3.3 trillion. So that's going to be our new number. I do have something I want to show you. I'm very proud of this. This is a demonstration held in Chicago by the workers unions there that showed, and this is 10 years ago, that our study back then showed $1.5 trillion in economic benefit through legalization. Well, today we're going to have the same demonstration, and that number is now going to be $3.2 trillion. Okay, the more we wait, actually, the more potentially productive these workers are for the future of the economy. So that's important. All right. You know, I don't want to go into too much detail. This is not a seminar on a Sunday, but I do want to make a couple of other points just briefly about mostly politics. Okay. All right. So how are we going to get to this moment? How are we going to be able to get, which is an obvious economic necessity, and let alone moral necessity for the United States, and massive economic benefit for the United States? How are we going to get this achieved through the Congress of the United States? Well, we've been doing a lot of work on this. We have, in fact, an analysis of all the congressional districts in the United States, and how they're going to potentially vote in the on these bills. Okay, so basically, this is our targets. These are our target districts. These are all the districts. I was speaking about this in a minute ago. I'm producing a book at the University of California Press next month. It's released. It's called The Trump Paradox. Okay, and somebody asked me, what's the Trump paradox? Well, the Trump paradox is that the people that are most against immigration, that have the worst attitudes about immigrants and most voted for Donald Trump, are actually in places where there are least immigrants. Okay, you know, the places where there are the most immigrants, okay, actually vote against Trump the most. All right. What's interesting is that in the last 4 years, there's been many areas that have now flipped from Republican to Democrat, both in the 2018 and the 2020 election. I think, thank you, Donald Trump. A lot of people, like my friends at the Lincoln Project, have been saying they don't want to be associated with this point of view of anti-immigration, apparently. And our attitudinal surveys and our economic analysis actually shows that this is a real possibility. There are a number of people that are fleeing the Republican Party and are fleeing the Republican Party because of this issue of immigration. And these are the areas around the country that that we need to target. And Magali and who I've been working with for many years, as I said, and Lydia, we've been figuring out, well, how do we move these members of Congress? Because the reality of it is, if in order for this bill to pass right now, if it passes in something called regular order, we're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. We'll pass it in the House, but we're going to need 60 votes in the Senate. The problem is we only have 50 Democratic votes, 51 if you count Kamala Harris. All right, that means we need 9 Republicans. It's going to be very, very difficult to get these 9 Republicans. But we are focused on those states. What are called the Blue Dog and the Problem Solver Caucuses and the Sweet 16. There's a number of numbers, and what we need to do is get to the voters, a lot of whom go to church in those states, to bug the hell out of their representatives. Okay, so we know where they are. And we think we have a notion of their messages. So I want to just play something with you. Hold on, let me see if I can do this. Let me see it. Okay. All right, I'm going to try to play this. Sorry.
Because its fabric is made from the best.
This is a show a little piece we produced literally in a week's time
of the world
for the Super Bowl. Except I'm not having a very easy time at this. I'm sorry.
This nation.
Okay, let me do this. I'm very curious of your reaction. And again, we did this in conjunction with Southwest Voter, Gamaliel, and the Nate Center, and see what you. And we're targeting it to these Republicans.
America plays ball like no one else in the world because its fabric is made from the best of the world.
I think the screen sharing's not on.
Players
what's up?
You're not screen sharing. You're not screen sharing.
I'm not screen sharing.
No. America the best team.
All right, hold on.
This year, there are 2.
Let me see how I can do
There's
this.
a button in the middle, share content.
America.
Yeah. I don't know why it's not letting me do this because. Okay. Well, it's unfortunately. I'm just gonna. Lydia, if you could just share the link. This is in a.
I just sent the link. It's from the C4 work that we're doing under the Southwest SVREP Action Fund. When you open the link, it is the first video. It's almost 2 minutes and almost 3 minutes. And it's called All Americans versus Trumpians. And it's trying to divide the world into those that care about America and those that are fascist and racist. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's your.
No, I'm sorry. I apparently this doesn't. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Or am I still sharing screens?
No, you're not sharing screens.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm sorry about that, but I'd be very interested in your commentaries about this. Again, what's the point here? The point is we've got the numbers, we have the detailed analysis, and this is going to be released. And our point is the full and inclusive immigration reform is extremely beneficial for the United States and the taxpayers of the United States. Any attempt to do not the full reform and just do maybe DACA, TPS, ag workers, or just essential workers doesn't quite get us there, especially, but essential workers is the vast majority of them. We have to make sure that we cover them. And again, we're gonna need to do a project of political convincing. We have a strategy that I think that the religious community can play a very important role of mobilizing resources of, we did it over the last couple of elections, mechanisms that Lydia and Magali can talk about in terms of phone banking, etc., moving the church community that we think can make a big impact in terms of these voters. But and here's where I really want to end on a political note. The reality of it is that actually I want to make two points. One political reality, and then come back to the current moment. The political reality is that if we do not achieve immigration reform through the Senate by this summer, the danger is that we will simply not be able to achieve this. All right. And just like happened during the first term of the Obama administration. So we need, and everybody has to be ready to do this and start talking to their progressive Congress people now to say that if this doesn't happen, we need at least to pass a full set of bills that deal with DACA, temporary protective status, and essential workers, and pass those bills through what's called the budget reconciliation with 50%. There's going to be a lot of pushback. That can be done entirely by the Democrats themselves, right? And we have to be able to demand that if we're not getting this through the Senate, that and we'll know very soon whether that's going to be a reality or not, then we're going to have to demand that the Democrats and the president agree to do this through this 50+1 strategy of budget reconciliation. All right. If there's questions about that, so we have to be ready for that, is what I'm trying to say. We have a path. We have a realistic path. We have, again, a moral argument. We have an economic argument, and we have a political strategy that can get us there. We need to stay focused and vigilant. And let me just end on one point, another part of the research that we're coming up with. What's very significant about what the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, and I've worked with Kamala Harris since she, I've known her since 1982, when she was before college, before law school. Her dad and I were professors at Stanford. And we've been working on issues of immigration and its root causes. She understands this. Her dad's Jamaican, okay? And what we are, and Joe Biden also understands this. When he worked in the last couple of years in the Biden administration, he was put in charge of doing work in Central America. He understands, and this is very important, that in this bill, for the first time in any bill on immigration, we address this issue from a transnational perspective. We do create the avenue, the pathway for doing something about root causes. The problem is that what's being proposed at this point is completely inadequate. The bill at this point calls for, $1 billion a year for the next 4 years to deal with root causes. That's a joke, okay? And we can talk more about what USAID why that's completely impossible to be done through USAID. However, there's something extremely interesting. If you look at the workers that are cleaning our houses and our communities and the essential workers today, they are responsible for sending back to Mexico and Central America close to $65 billion a year in remittances, 40 billion to Mexico, about 25 billion to Central America. Our projections are that over the next 10 years, especially if we get legalization, whereas as incomes would rise, we will send immigrants in the United States will send back to Mexico and Central America almost $1 trillion, right, over the next 10 years. There's no way in the world foreign aid is going to get anywhere near that. The problem is that those $1 trillion right now all go through things like Western Union, which right off the bat will keep 10% of that for that. What we have been doing is working with the Mexican Senate and progressive leadership in Central America and progressive leadership in the Congress to create a mechanism for financial empowerment of immigrants. Immigrants, if they we can now, there's a new world, we can use these things to send remittances for free. There could be changes in regulatory environment to create free remittances, number one. Number two, this money can now go to networks of community-based credit unions throughout Mexico and Central America. That should be what we should be building up. We should be building up not only the political and civil empowerment of immigrants in the United States, as well as their economic empowerment in the United States, but through this mechanism of financial inclusion on both sides of the border, we can generate more than enough than anything US foreign aid will ever come up with, okay? To be able to address sustainable economic development, job creating activities, which currently now we are foregoing. We're in fact, our system of not only undocumented immigration, but unbanked remittances, all of this money going in cash does not have the ability to be turned into savings and investments for microfinance sustainable development. We have examples. We're working with networks of community groups throughout Mexico and Central America that are already ready to go and could generate these mechanisms for sustainable development. Immigrants, even this year, which is astonishing to many people, this year of COVID crisis, remittances increased by over 10%. Okay. Again, imagine that. It's the example of the compassion of immigrants. They are ready to help solve the problems. And that's, I think, the final message here, that what we have is a possibility within the United States to empower the most hardest working oppressed community and turn around their lives, our lives, and the lives of their families back home. And we must be able to do this year. So I think I'm going to stop there. I know I hope I didn't go. I stopped early, right? Vanessa, am I good?
Yeah, nobody ever stops early. I don't even know what to do in such moments.
Well, don't worry. I'll take it up in questions.
And I hope people notice that in the links in the chat were some links like to the video that that we couldn't get the screen share for. So please, note that down for yourselves.
And Magali, if you could send them also, well, I'll send them the links to all of our UCLA studies. I know it's a couple of people asked for, we will, and we will also be getting, we are releasing, as I said, this report this week to all networks of the think tanks, of the unions, of the, and again, we're going to focus on these on a broad political bimodal approach to this. So I don't know, Vanessa, up to you. What do you want to do? If we want to take some questions now or wait till later?
Well, I think Bruce wanted to let everybody and Nathan want everybody to speak, and then we would have a Q&A at the end. Shall we? Okay. So I'm assuming we'll just stick with that plan unless I'm interrupted by the powers that be. So Lydia Camarillo, would you like to go next? And then Magali will finish us up today.
Thank you. Let me start by first thanking you. It's a Sunday. Some of you are maybe, or I don't know if you are, those of us that have been in Texas, we're also dealing with a new reality. We had no power, we had no food, we had no water, so forth. But I think a lot of the families are now doing better. And certainly in my household, we were almost 3 days without power, and now we're fine and we're warm and we're doing well, and hoping that other families in Texas can do well. As well as, of course, we're now compounding that with the weather doesn't allow for food distributions to come to the store. So that's sort of what's happening here in Texas. But not to take away from the presentation, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Over the last 3 decades, I would argue that Reverend Rabell is correct. The last and Reverend Vanessa, we've been dealing with how do we protect and how do we legalize the 11 million undocumented. We've always said, and we've seen through the years different strategies. One of which has been, and recently, I would say the heroes of the young men and women that were ACA themselves, dreamers, undocumented, who took to the streets and brought the issue forward. But also, there's been a conversation always about how we cannot change any public policy unless those who govern us care about our issues. And so last year, we talked about what we wanted to see in terms of the immigration bill. We know that when there's a Republican control, asking for the DREAM Act and for ag seems appropriate. Now that we have the 3 chambers that are controlled by the Democrats, while there's a limit, you know, the Senate is tight, 50-50. The Congress lost some seats, so it's not as large the majority on the Democratic side as it should be. But we always knew, and we discussed this at length, about how it was important that we find a way for the 11 million. We also know that undocumented. We also know that it's part of the conversation we're having with Congressman Castro and other leaders through the work that Dr. Raul Hinajosa and Magali and Camarillo and other groups are working on, is that if we include the essential workers, which from the perspective of the Castro proposal, it seems even broader than how it's defined by Homeland Security. And so we're excited about that, and we're working with that. But we knew then in November or before November last year that if the Congress continued to stay in control of the Democrats and the Senate was flipped in the White House, we finally voters got rid of the fascist that was at the White House, that there might be an opportunity for a true immigration bill. We are very worried that if it's not handled quickly during the session, then in October or November, it becomes the next cycle of the election, the 22 cycle, and then folks might not want to deal with this issue. So it's very important for us to think about the 22 election in a number of ways. One, from the immigration perspective, have to target congressional members that are Republican, but also Democrat, to stand with us and go for the whole thing, the whole enchilada, as they say in my world. Because if we don't, then we're going to lose an opportunity. 22 election is difficult to tell whether we can continue to expand the number of Democrats on the Congress, and we don't know yet if the Senate seats that were gained can be sustained and gaining some more. So we have to be very, very careful that the strategy that we do to make sure that we engage voters in the districts that we target, to call those voters and the congressional districts and the state Senate and the Senate seats, that we move to having these voters tell those folks that we need them to have an immigration bill that makes sense, an immigration bill that's fair, and no more security policies in there. We've had enough of that. So it's very, very important for us to do that. The second part that we have to work on is preparing for 2022. Arizona and Georgia senators are already at risk and are already being targeted. As we all know, while I want to say first and foremost that progressives did an incredible job this last election, the young voters were stunning. The Black vote was extraordinary. They delivered as they promised they would. But I also have to tell you that if Latinos hadn't voted, we wouldn't have Biden administration. Biden would have lost, and we wouldn't have the 2 Senate seats in Georgia flip. Why do I say that? Because Georgia, for example, as you remember, the president asked the Secretary of State that he wanted 11,779 votes because that was the margin of victory for Biden. Well, we also know that an estimated 105,000 Latino voters voted in Georgia for that election. If they had stayed home, or as in Raul Hinajosa's words, if the Mexicans, or a day without a Mexicans, if they had stayed home and not voted, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin would not have flipped. Let me be very clear again. Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin would not have flipped. The margins were very, very small, except for in Pennsylvania and in Michigan. I'll come back to Michigan in a minute. The margin of victory, as I said, for Georgia was 11,779. For Arizona, it was 10,457. For Pennsylvania, it's 81,660. And for Wisconsin was 20,000. But in every state that I just mentioned, the Latino electorate voted just as many votes of the margin of victory, or twice as much, or in the case of Arizona, it's 10,000 to 846,000. In the case of Georgia, it's 11,000 to 105,000. So I say this because it's important that as part of the strategy, and all of you I know are involved in knowing the donors and the leaders, don't forget to fund Latino vote early, not as an afterthought. And if you don't choose the organization that's mine, the one that's 46 years old, 47 years old, excuse me, a new year, then choose somebody, but invest in the Latino electorate. We have to include the Latino electorate. For the Georgia electorate, runoff race, I don't have all the data yet. The Secretary of State hasn't pulled all the numbers. There's 1.5 million voters that we don't know if they were white voters, Black voters, Asian, other, or Latino. So I can't with all certainty say which way, how it went. We know some percentages, but if I don't have how they voted, we can only guess and estimate. We know as of today with the data that if Latinos had stayed home and not voted for Ossoff, he would have lost. Warnoff won by a larger margins. So until we have those numbers, I can't tell you with certainty. But one senator does not flip the Senate. And so those points are important for us. So again, I'm asking you to think about 2 things. Help us take the message to the list that we will share with you once we finalize it, of congressional members and Senate members who have to help us make sure that we do and we pass an immigration bill that the President Biden can sign in his first 100, 300 days. Because if we don't do this, we're going to end up with the situation that happened with President Obama, that because he was too concerned and very worried with other issues, which are similar concerns and crises that Biden is facing, we will not again be able to do what we need to do, because the season will then move into an election cycle. And in an election cycle, members of Congress and senators are by far more concerned with their livelihood than with the lives of those that we must be working for and protecting, and making sure that we find policies, not only on immigration, but on other areas, so that communities can have an opportunity to live with respect and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. People have been asking about your organization's name. I put the website in, but if there's any more information you want to give folks in the chat, I know some folks are asking. Magali Sanchez-Hall.
Thank you. So I'm going to be very brief because I do want to open it up for questions. I think it's very important. So just wanted to let you know, I work very close with the indigenous communities, and today I was supposed to be at a funeral of a worker, a farm worker in Coachella Valley, but I couldn't go because I had to stay here. There was no internet over there, so I had to stay back home. But just wanted to tell you about the essential workers, disposable families. This is basically it, okay? So this woman, who's from the Purupecha community, is gonna be repatriated to Mexico. So she passed away because of COVID, right? And these are the essential workers that we are seeing that are basically passing away. And this is their land. They didn't migrate. This is their land. They moved back and forward, south and north. And we're still having to cross the border, send the body back to Mexico, and their kids cannot go. 6 children have to stay here because they cannot go. So these are the issues and the morality of what Pastor Nelson was talking about the stranger among us. They're not strangers. We probably are the strangers, right? So, and I am a Lutheran, by the way. Faith, very strong with my faith. And I want to talk about the days of actions that we're going to have, who we're working with, and how you can be part of these actions to make sure that we do pass this time a bill for them and for everyone to have the opportunity to be here with documents, to have an identity basically, and to be able to cross back, because the border is not for them not to be able to come in, it's for them not to be able to go back home, basically. And we have to eliminate that. And the only way we can do this is by pushing our legislators. Right now, this is the time. We've been working with Gamaliel. I don't know if you're familiar with Gamaliel, but we've been working with Gamaliel for about 3 months now, doing presentations and also calling for actions. And one of the things is that, and we also are working with Fuerza Migrante, which is another organization of over 200 organizations of immigrants. And we're also working with the indigenous communities, and we're also working with different states and organizations and grassroots movements. I wanted to tell you, with Fuerza Migrante, we're having the 100,000 letters that will be sent out to different US senators and also to President Joe Biden. And that, if you want to be part of it, I'm going to put my information in the chat, and you can email me and I will redirect you where would you want to go and what kind of actions would you like to participate. Gamaliel, we started the Lent on February 17 with a press release of 40 days of actions. And that we're doing training, we're providing toolkits, and we are basically making phone calls to the target Republicans from the Senate and also from Congress. And I can send you that schedule if you email me on May 1st, which is massive march that we're going to have in every big city in the United States, which is Labor Day, International Workers' Day. Please also email me and I will send you the information in what city or where or who's organizing in your city where you are. And another thing that we're going to be doing pretty soon is going to be making phone banks. We're going to have phone banks with Lydia and also with Gamaliel and also with other groups that I'm working with, and also in Florida with Rise Up Florida. And we're going to be training people on how to call, who to call, and we're going to be targeting the Sweet 16 U.S. senators, and also those 20 the Republicans who are going to be, running in that are for take on to 2022. So these are the actions that we will be taking. I encourage you to participate. This is not only a moral issue. They deserve this. They have earned this. These are the people that are working for us to eat, and they're dying, and we're treating them like they're disposable. It cannot happen. It cannot continue anymore. So I'm going to put my information, and any questions I'll be more than happy to answer. And I wanted to add something to what Professor Hinojosa mentioned, and is that this bill is very, very important because it has something in it that addresses the root causes of migration. And this is what we need to be talking about. Why do people migrate? You know, like Pastor Nelson mentioned too, you know, this is something that it's from the initiation of the Bible. In the book, it's in there. We migrate. It's a human thing that we do this. We look for new places and spaces. So I urge you to please support this bill. We don't want it in pieces, but if it has to happen, we're going to go ahead and support it too, you know. But we want the whole full enchilada, like Lydia Camarillo said. And it is time. This is our time. We cannot wait any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magali Sanchez-Hall, and everybody for your kind of laying the landscape of the conversation for today. And I know there have already been questions that have been put in the chat. Catherine, I'm going to let you take us through in whatever order you deem appropriate for the conversation.
Here I am. Thank you. Great discussion. Just as a reminder, people have been asking for, Magali said she's put in her email. So if you could insert your email so we can all write to you and get a list of the congressional people that we should be contacting and any other ways that we can support the effort. And also to remind everyone else, Lydia's information has been posted in the chat, and her organization. The first question is to Professor Hinajosa, and I'm asking where your studies are published, or if you can share your studies.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to give you guys a link to where the studies are, and then they're at the UCLA NAID Center. And so yes, I'm more than happy to do that and share that with you. And like I say, I mean, I hope that what's going on here is that we are now in a network of communication and activism with your people today, and that we will be giving you more information, and hopefully you can join the campaigns that Magali and Lydia are putting together. If you do that, you put your email in our network, and then we'll be getting you information on a regular basis, as well as obviously being training, because the other thing we need to do is to internalize all this information. You're all going to be tested on this, okay? So that we can have you be able to be little experts, you know, when you talk to the Congress people. But yes, it's definitely easily available. Magali, I don't know if you have, can you do that, or should I do that?
I'm actually looking at the I'm looking at the link, but I can't, somehow it goes into error.
I'll do it. I'll do
okay.
it. Okay. Very good.
Thank you. Another question that I think is on many people's minds are whether the undocumented workers are being denied relief under the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, and how do the Democrats justify that, if that's true?
Okay. In fact, it is true, and in fact, this report that I'm putting up right now is focused on this exact issue. We not only the current bill that was passed the bills that were passed last year not only denied undocumented workers, but anybody who lived in a household where an undocumented worker was present, even if they were citizens, were denied. That's the difference, okay, between the last year, this year. The good news is that the bill that was passed for the $600 dropped that. So now, if you're undocumented, you still can't get any money, but at least people in the household can get the money. Now, unfortunately, the bill as it stands right now, the $1.9 trillion COVID does not include benefits for the undocumented. The study that I'm going to share with you all shows the absurd economic folly of doing that, because it turns out if you give money to people that most need it, they're going to spend it the most, okay? And that has what's called a multiplier effect, so that the actual cost of giving relief is very low, and the economic benefits is extremely high. And it's particularly extremely high for places like California. I mean, look, folks, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, we are still in an uphill battle, even among the Democrats, okay? We must have to be able to insist that obviously if the bill passes, as I said, through what's called the budget reconciliation, the immigration bill, then we would be okay, and they would be able to receive benefits. So this is within the power of Democrats. They don't want to jeopardize this 1.9 trillion by insisting that immigrants also be able, undocumented immigrants also be able to get it at this point. That's a call that Nancy Pelosi is making. I can understand that. We'll let them slide one more time. But again, we're going to demand, you all, please, I want to pledge, all of you are going to demand that the Democrats this year pass the immigration bill, be it through regular order or through this budget reconciliation. Then we would finally be out of this insanity of the way that we're treating people as essential, but as we say in the report, also disposable.
And if I may add something to what Professor Hinajosa has been saying, I have received to administer from Faith in the Valley close to $900,000. For example, to give aid to migrant families, undocumented migrant families. Like Magali has helped me identify members of, for example, the Purepecha community. Like today, she helped me. I brought here to LA a check, and she was able to take it to one of these families. But even with that kind of help, with that kind of money, we were only able to help about 800 families. So one of the things that we have discovered, and I belong to another organization, faith-based, called Faith in the Valley. And one of the things that they have in their studies is that obviously there's no way that through philanthropy, there's no philanthropic way out of this situation. So that's why what Professor Hinajosa is so important. This has to be a national, federal response to help and aid the migrant community that's being affected by COVID-19. And I'll give you numbers from the San Joaquin County. That's the county where I live, that encompasses, it's right below Sacramento County, includes Stockton, Lodi, Tracy, and other cities that people know. But basically San Joaquin County alone has about 22,000 homes or rental units, mostly occupied by migrant workers, because this is a rural area, that the main part of the economy is agricultural work. So 22,000 homes. Now, do the numbers are potentially, could be potentially evicted because of the economic impact of COVID-19. Most of those homes are occupied by migrant families. So here in San Joaquin County, we have about 760,000 people. And if this was to happen, if there's no relief for migrant workers, we're talking about at least 1/7 of the population of the county being told to go homeless. That's the impact. I mean, just think about the numbers. And this is assuming a family of 4 on those 22,000 rental units. So that's the impact that just to bring it to a county, which is not a huge, like let's say LA County, but San Joaquin County, just 760,000 people. That's the type of impact that this lack of federal response is having. So thank you. I just wanted to contribute with those numbers to help out and put like a face, an idea, a very concrete idea of what we're talking about.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you, Reverend, for that. And yeah, we have worked. Well, I'll leave it at that. Why don't we just move on, and then if there's another question, then we can talk some more.
Thank you. And just to clarify, in my mind, the bill you're referring to is the US Citizenship Act of 2021.
That's correct. That's the most. And again, what we're saying is that's a great bill. It's very comprehensive. But you know, as Lydia was saying, there are other bills out there. There is something specifically for the DACA. It's called the DREAM Act, right? There's another bill specifically for Central American temporary protective status called the Promise Act. There's a bill for agricultural labor called the Farm Modernization Act. And there's a new bill that's going to be introduced on essential workers by our new Senator Alex Padilla and Congressman Castro. Now, the value of those individual bills is that it can gather lots of support. For example, it turns out if you ask people, are you for DACA, for the young kids, right? We all know about the young children that were brought here and now don't have papers. There's an extremely high acceptance of that. Close to 85%, including a majority of Republicans, are for that, right? Which may not be the numbers that we're going to get for the full immigration bill, right? So just so we got to keep in mind, there's a strategy of whatever can easily get done, we're going to go for it, right? Okay, and that's basically what's being discussed, is that, you know, we may only be able to get an immediate bill that gets partially. Where the immigrant rights community has said, if we have a chance of getting anything through right away, we're going to go with it. We're not going to say all or nothing. All right. So I'm just saying, keep in mind, please, as you help us in this immigration struggle, that there is this flexibility that we're all trying to maintain. We want the full bill, but getting a full bill may be more difficult. It may be more possible to get various components put together. Because why? Because if you say, well, we're for legalizing all the 11 million, that sounds too abstract and people don't know what that means. But if we say we're going to do the DACA kids, oh, okay. Or we're going to do the essential workers. Oh, I get it. Name, address, a face. We understand what an essential worker is. So there is that dynamic going on.
We also have to be very careful that bills aren't pitted against each other, so that we can make sure that we obviously, like I said, the Dreamers, which is DACA, is only like 700,000, 800,000, depending on who's talking. But the Dreamers is more like 1.2, 1.3 million. And so those are, some folks did not apply for DACA. So that's why it's the Dreamers, it's the kids. Everybody wants to do that. And so our premise, at least mine and my organization, and I know it's part of the conversations we've been having with the leaders and groups of immigrant rights groups, this would have happened under an immigration, under a Republican controlled Congress, if one or the Senate. So we have to push for more. So the essential workers is the one that I think brings us more. But if we can get to the 11 million, of course, that's what we're really going for. Let's just be careful not to have communities be pitted against each other, or rather the bills, because that has happened. We've certainly seen it in California with some immigration bills.
Is it addressed in either the Citizenship Act or any of the other proposed or pending bills, the issue of the detention centers for the asylum seekers?
That is being addressed right now through executive orders, okay? And there is discussion in the bills themselves to, yeah, fundamentally restructure the detention process. The fact of the matter is that yes, we right now there's supposedly a moratorium on people being moved into the privately run detention centers, and there's a moratorium in terms of actually detaining families, so that if people are currently being come to the border, they are being admitted into a refugee status or asylum status, and then being released through Department of Health and Human Services, which is in charge of tracking them. So for now, you know, the detention horror that we were seeing under the Trump administration has been effectively put out of business, but it's still on the books. I mean, yes, so we are going to need a bill. We're going to need a lot of work. You know, the new director of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, also California, is designing new processes, but yeah, that's a major problem that we still need to address.
And I also wanted to add on that matter. I'm actually reading the bill. It's 353 pages, and dissecting what it's actually entailed inside the bill. But I do want to mention that it's very broad. So there's still probably, they're going to continue to add right now more information on how they're going to be doing right now, what they're going to be doing with this alternative detention, or expanding the alternative to detention. So there's not really very, direct information on that, but we will see. And there is the talks that they are trying to get rid of the detention centers, and we will see. I don't know how exactly, but that's what I have heard.
Is there any special consideration or activity focused on the separated children?
Yes, there's a new task force right now that actually the First Lady Jill Biden is leading, and there's her chief of staff, Julissa Reynoso is in charge of, and so they are right now going and working with nonprofits to find. There's apparently something like 660 families that so they they're making progress. The idea is that they're going to try to reunite those families in the United States, which is fine. I mean, obviously Fox News is losing their brain over this, but the reality of it is it's a horrible issue, but it's a very small part of the whole problem, right? We are getting, I mean, the reality of it is they're turning, and this is, I think, the most significant thing is they're turning away from this remain in Mexico strategy, which was basically the United States worked out with Mexico this agreement that if you came to the border to ask for asylum, even though international law and U.S. law says that they have to be given a entrance if they have if they claim a well-founded fear of persecution. They were left in Mexico. So those people are now being led into the United States. They're going through COVID testing, and then they're being given, as I was saying, through Health and Human Services, and being placed in various housing, not detention centers, but housing of various types. This is going to be a very I can tell, very contentious process. There's a lot of work that also has to be done as people are moving from Central America and up through Mexico to now take advantage of this. And I think we need to be able to, as particularly the religious communities that believe in asylum, to make a very strong stance, because I monitor Fox News all the time. They're literally, this is something that they're going to use, and they're just like we're having this meeting. Believe me, Steve Miller and all these people are having a meeting right now and mobilizing their people to call the Congress to exactly stop this particular thing. They are going after asylum, and they're saying this is an example of the United States having no borders, etc. And the reality of it is we're at a very, we basically stopped the asylum process almost entirely under the Trump administration. We're just beginning to gear up, but we need support on this, and we need religious support. So any of you, that again, even if you have a progressive Congress person, you need to tell them that you need to get a backbone here and support the asylum process.
Yes, and it is mentioned in the bill. It's very strong mentioned in the bill on Title 4, Immigration Courts, Family Values, and Vulnerable Individuals. It's a lot there about asylum, about children, about families unification, and not to separate, and also the deportations of these families to stop. And so there is a lot of this in the bill. That's why it's very important to support this bill.
I noticed that Reverend Vanessa has had to leave the building because they have to close it down. Bruce, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here. Yeah.
Reverend Vanessa left because they had to
I
close.
know. She told me that she had to leave. Yeah. So,
okay. I noticed it's after 3:30. Do you want to continue?
Yeah. How do people feel? I don't mind going on for a few more minutes. How do other people feel? Why don't we just continue? How do you guys feel, Raul and Lydia, Reverend Nelson?
Yeah, if you have a couple of, if you have a question or two, I could do another question or two. I unfortunately I do have people invading my my space right now that need my attention.
Well, how about one more question that relates, how about a mixed family? For example, if one is a citizen and the other is undocumented, how are they being handled in that situation?
Well, again, the good news is we got rid of that provision in the current bill that decriminalizes being a family member of an undocumented, okay, for all intents and purposes. So that's good. And I mean, the issue is obviously family members, those family units would benefit greatly from this bill, that it would allow for the family to all begin a process of temporary status, well, not temporary status, it's actually green card residency, which is fantastic. There is still a question, however, of whether they will be all allowed to be eligible for medical benefits. We're trying to push for that to be included in the bill. And again, you know, I think what this bill is giving us an opportunity is to understand how the focus of legislation up until now, the whole focus of immigration enforcement has been to punish the immigrant. In a way, to think that if you punish the immigrant and make them suffer, somehow that's going to not reduce the incentive for people to come here. You know, so that completely misguided mentality, of which there's no evidence for, is still there. We need to get rid of that. What we need to do is focus on the fact that the faster immigrants are incorporated into the society and are given inclusion into the society, what's called immigrant integration, which is a part of the bill, and that's a very important part of the bill, is better off. We're all better off letting people catch up as quickly as possible, not only have access to services. It's very interesting. We did an analysis of the 1986 immigration bill, right? Where that Ronald Reagan, that great American, signed, right? Well, it turns out that after that bill, there was huge economic benefit because immigrants themselves invested in their own education, invested in their own language skills, into their own job skills. And the more rapidly they became integrated, the more rapidly they're able to have better jobs, better credit scores to be able to buy houses, send their kids to UCLA. And then that's when the real benefits kick in. All this economic benefit that I talked about is only the minimal benefits that we get by getting people out of the shadows. The more rapidly we integrate people into the society, the better off we all are.
Well, I think maybe that's, does anybody else, are there any more questions there, or is that it? Are we going to?
Well,
Catherine,
there was another
questions?
question asking for a summary of the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, and Magali in the chat.
Magali's an expert.
And Magali's response is basically all 11 million undocumented migrants will have a pathway towards citizenship. This includes all, including essential workers.
Yes,
Okay,
and
I want
the
to.
time, the time, which was very, very interesting, is for everyone that has been in this country before January of this year, 2021. So everyone basically is eligible for this bill. So I really commend what is in this bill. I think they gave us what we asked for, and I think we should push for this bill, and that in the negotiation process that they don't take things away, that they keep it as it is, or include even more protections for children, of that are coming here into this country, who will be the future of this country, basically.
So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to thank our presenters for spending their time with us and explaining all this stuff. It's we all realize this is super important, and I agree that the moment right now is the moment to move. I hope we can. I've seen these promises being broken so many times in the past, but this may be the time. So I think everybody that is on this call and everybody who can reach out to other people in their own orbits should impress on them that, we've talked about immigration, we've talked about justice. Now is the time to move on that. And Magali, if you're going to be, you can send me, or any of the other folks here, send me information at the forum at uusf.org. And we have a fairly large list of people we can send the information out to, not just the people that were on the call today, but there's a much broader community out there that could be mobilized around this, and we'll do our best to do that. And I know that Catherine works with, and Mary, who's also on this call, Mary Ritter, worked with St. Mark's, and their sanctuary group will also do the same. So with that, thank you so much, everybody.